Welcome to another episode of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I'm Michael Walker, your host for this episode. Before we get started, I want to thank all our incredible listeners from the United States, Canada, and around the globe. Your continuous support means everything to us. A special thank you also goes out to our sponsor for this episode, Equa Marketing. With nearly 20 years of experience, Equa Marketing is a leader in digital marketing services for aesthetic practices. They are offering our listeners, that's you, today, a complimentary digital marketing consultation, which will include a tailor-made 12-month digital strategy for your practice. You'll be able to head over to businessofesthetics.org/MSM to book your consultation today. You'll also find where you're picking up this podcast that the link should be available for you there as well. But let's go ahead and let's jump into today's topic. Operational excellence in aesthetics, practice management, laser surgery, and client experience with Rebecca Landriault. And today I am thrilled to welcome Rebecca to the podcast. Thank you for taking the time today.
I'm so honored to be here, Michael. Thank you.
Rebecca is a seasoned expert in the aesthetics industry with nearly 2 decades of hands-on experience. Her background spans practice management, operational efficiency, clinical laser expertise, and vendor negotiations, making her a powerhouse resource. I like that phrase, Rebecca. A powerhouse resource for practices looking to grow and thrive. Rebecca has helped numerous clients streamline their workflows, enhance the patient experience, and make smarter decisions when it comes to high-stakes investments like laser devices. Whether you're running a single location med spa or scaling to multiple sites, her insights into business operations and client relations are invaluable. Rebecca, as I say, it's a pleasure to have you. And let's start at the beginning. Well, not right at the beginning, but we'll roll back a little bit. What brought you into the world of aesthetics, and how has your experience shaped the way you support practices today?
So, going in the Wayback Machine a couple of decades ago, I did start out as just a baby esthetician. It was a bit of a career refocus after some time in corporate America and just a little bit of a tough time around that first crash of the economy in 2008, and had to kind of look at reinventing myself a little bit. And I took the time to go back to aesthetic school, and I was lucky enough to land at one of the first really kind of non-core medical spas in the city of Chicago. So, back in that 2008, 2009 timeframe, there weren't medical spas on every corner. There were a handful of dermatologists and plastic surgeons who may have been doing some injectables, but there really wasn't as much in the way of skin procedures and laser procedures, back when I started. And so I kind of had the opportunity to launch one of those first locations in Chicago with an ER physician. And we really grew from renting a space in a dentist's office with just one suite or one room that he and I shared, all the way up to a multi-treatment room, larger facility, and grew to quite a few patients and 5-star reviews. And that was really, again, kind of before some of the marketing strategies that we have today. It was really largely word of mouth. And so, one of the things that I think is really important is taking a look at your operations and taking a look at what your day-to-day, client experience and what your in the treatments and the service that your staff are performing, because ultimately the referral is the name of the game, right? So after I left that practice, I have spent then the last almost 15 years in sales for a number of different organizations. So I started off kind of in that post-sale realm with lasers, where I was helping practices who had purchased a device, then kind of work through their consumable and grow that business. And from there, I went and started in capital device equipment sales. So I sold lasers for many years for 3 different companies, 3 of the really larger companies in the space. And I also spent a time selling injectables and regenerative medicine products. So I've kind of done a little bit of it all. I've been on the practice management side. I was an esthetician. I was a laser technician. I've done some clinical training. And I've worked in skincare sales, injectable sales, laser sales. And then, of course, even, with that kind of that practice development post-laser role I had in doing client events, selling packages, kind of a little bit of everything. And that was really what drove me then to start this business a year ago, was to say, I just think There are so many excellent providers out there that are giving wonderful treatments to their patients who just ask me every day, why is it that I can't grow? Or how do I grow? And there's just in that clinical proficiency, that piece where the provider is providing an excellent treatment is just a small portion of the overall success of a practice. And so while I always say, I'm not a doctor, nor am I a clinical trainer anymore for any company. So I am not one to give you clinical guidance. Really, every other piece of your business, I feel as if there's probably nobody out there that is as experienced as I am in terms of kind of every other little piece of the practice.
Well, that certainly rings true from what you just shared. And what is it with the new focus you have? What is it that you're most passionate about with it?
So I think what I'm most passionate about is a practice's success. So I think, and that for me, this is a beautiful thing that we're doing in this industry, right? And maybe not everybody has that opinion globally, but when you really think about it, providing an excellent treatment, whether it's a cosmetic enhancement or a tweakment, like maybe we're doing some lip filler, or we're providing a laser treatment and we're helping a patient who's getting rid of their acne scars, or we're doing hair restoration on somebody, we are often offering these patients kind of a renewed look on life. And they're really, we're correcting things that may have been an issue with their self-esteem. And so for me, I want practices to thrive because I do think we're doing a beautiful thing in this business. And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of resources out there that can provide my clinical providers, my MDs, my NPs, my PAs, the people with independent practice authority, my RN injectors, my non-medical entrepreneurs. There's not much resource out there to talk to you about how to provide an excellent experience in cash-based medicine. So many providers come from an insurance-based, practice where, whatever the EMR that they've chosen or the EMR that they're using is the one that company has chosen. We don't know which one to pick. The treatments that we're doing are dictated by, largely the whoever it is that I work for. And then we leave that setting and we go into private practice, and it's mostly cash-based medicine. And suddenly we're having to make a lot of business decisions, and there's really nobody there to support people. And I find it especially, and maybe it's because I came from laser sales, and I consistently tell people that the reason why I'm so passionate about practice success is that I have to do some penance for my peers in the laser sales industry because it's so predatory. And I know that I can confidently say that I was able to sleep at night whenever I sold a device to a practice because it was the right device. That isn't the case in a lot of cases. So I'm doing some penance in this industry for those, like I said, those predatory practices. And that's what I found. I mean, a lot of people come to me and say, well, I bought this device prior to talking to you. Now I have this massive payment. How do I recoup my investment? Or I've started this practice and I've hired a bunch of people, but I have no people management background. I don't have leadership skills. How can you help me with that? Or I've started this practice and I don't even know where to begin from a compliance and regulatory standpoint. So we listen with just a hope and a prayer. There really is a very succinct process we have to go through to make sure that this is successful. And to me, it's a ladder, and it's helping these providers go rung by rung really diligently to make sure that each part of it is where it's supposed to be before we're doing things like investing in marketing and turning on a funnel, a flood of marketing. So that's really why I do this.
It's as I'm thinking about what you're saying, Sharon, I'm thinking about medical professionals kind of as a whole. I cover a pretty wide gamut in communication, from vets to dentists to aesthetic professionals, plastic surgeons, and there's this common denominator that most of them are arguably accidental entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And so you were never expected to have skills. That's not what you train for. That's not what you're passionate about, and it's not. But it becomes a critical function of the success of you and your brand and your practice. And I was thinking, I talk a lot about the idea of influential leadership, giving someone something they don't even know they need or want, once they have it, they can't imagine living without it, and then they can't wait to give it away. And I love that you just said it, like you're passionate about helping practices thrive so that their patients can thrive and so that they can give it away, meaning referrals and building. Does that make sense to you, Rebecca?
Yeah. And I think the thing, again, when I say that there aren't a lot of resources, unfortunately, there are just so many of these other predatory companies out there as well that they may be pitching their marketing resource to a provider. It's not really a marketing resource, right? They're not actually providing any marketing for you. They're having you buy a software that may create some lead generation. How warm are those leads? How good are those leads? Arguably, but you're locked into a year-long contract and you're like, but I thought they were doing my marketing, and they're not, So what I like to do, and the thing that, again, that I'm passionate about is in speaking to this individual provider or this individual practice owner and saying, for your life, what is it that you're looking for? Do you want to see just enough patients that you don't have to be there 60 hours a week, and this is profitable enough for you to be doing this and not just be a hobby, it be profitable? Or are you looking like, I want to build an empire. I want to have multiple locations. I want to have multiple employees. I mean, I have clients who their next step is setting up training centers, or their next step is opening up other locations. And I have some providers who say, I am perfectly happy being in this salon suite and being a solo provider, but how can you help me be better at what I'm doing? How can you help me increase my revenue without maybe increasing my footprint or increasing my my time that I'm in the practice? And often the people do come to me, and the first question they ask is, how do I get more patients? What do I need to do to market myself? And as I mentioned, with those, the rungs of the ladder, marketing is at the top. Marketing's the penthouse. If things are not secure, if the foundation is not secure in the basement, we start doing things up in the penthouse. And I always say, marketing is the tree that fell in the forest that no one heard. If we don't have a strong base, especially operational efficacy within our own practice, because then it will be, maybe we're putting a bunch of money into, say, social media ads or SEO, and now our phone is ringing and we're getting all of these inbound patient inquiries. Is our front desk equipped to answer these questions? Do we have someone at the front desk equipped or even able to answer these questions in some cases? Or we're, people sometimes choose to do like these daily deals, like a Groupon or something like that, and then they sell a ton. And do they even have the space and number of hours available to see these many patients? So we can't do those things in the penthouse until we've really worked hard at kind of at the foundation. So when I onboard my clients, I make it very clear that marketing is generally not a conversation we're having for at least 6 months, if not more in some cases, because you really have to have a strong practice operationally and be delivering excellent client experience before we want to spend money to bring more in.
Yeah, yeah. I love the penthouse analogy. That's a good way to put it, Rebecca. It's interesting. I mentioned at the top of the podcast that Equa Marketing is offering a marketing consultation, and it's exactly that. It's not to sell something, to have to go and buy a laser machine or something. It's simply, hey, here's some great information that based on a study of your digital footprint, what you might want to think about doing differently. And so it's a great asset. Well, we'll talk about that later. But something I was thinking when you're talking about, when we talk about that passion word, what are you passionate about? I mean, in this field, and then what do you want your story to be in 1, 2, 5 years or 10 years from now? And then how do we reverse engineer that, which is what you're talking about? And in that, how do we then plant the right people, places, resources to get to that story? And I think so often we just go in, we'll just go in and start a business and buy this equipment, and Bob's your uncle and off we go. And then we know what that looks like and what happens. And so I love the way you're just breaking this down and making it. I think the other thing is that sometimes, how do you eat an elephant, right?
Mm-hmm. Piece by piece.
One bite at a time. So, I mean, it's the people that are selling you stuff aren't going to say, they're going to say, now, if you have this will just be it. And what's that saying? It's the cat's pajamas. I'm not sure what that means, but it's like, this is it. And you'll be a rock star and life will go, it'd be great. And it doesn't materialize that way because as you said, you haven't kind of done the heavy lifting of the foundation of really laying a good operational both transactionally in what you do and how you do it, and relationally about who you are and why you matter. And I love the way you put that. But let's talk a bit about practice management. And from a practice management perspective, what are some of the most common operational gaps you see in aesthetic clinics, and how can they be addressed?
So in some cases, I see offices operating without even the basic kind of standard operating procedures. That would be the first thing that I would say. If you do not have a printed binder of standard operating procedures for every single one of your treatments that you're providing, every single process you're going through, opening checklists, closing checklists, things that OSHA require like bloodborne pathogen or chemical spill, if you don't have all of those things concisely done, drafted, and in a binder in your front office, that's the very first step. I mean, that's really a compliance argument, but also the next step then is you have to follow that by the book. So where I see the biggest gap happen is providers will go and they'll spend a ton of money with a law firm to get all these standard operating procedures written, or they'll take the time to do it all. Then that binder never leaves that very spot that they put it. And every employee that they've brought on doesn't know how to do each of these things. Maybe they are forgetting certain things in the opening and closing checklist. And immediately right there, you spent all the time, we built up the bricks, and then we're just letting them crumble. And there are certain things that are very important. You know, if we're not properly tracking inventory, we might now down the line find out that a product's missing or a patient wasn't rung out for something. And so these very foundational things, these are very easy checklists and procedures to do, but the idea is that you have to draft them and then you have to use them. So I think that's the most important part, is really knowing what is the correct way to do each and everything for every facet of your business, and then doing it and holding your team accountable to doing it. And that's where, you know, often in conversations kind of about the people management and leadership, which again, a medical provider may not have a ton of training or experience in. If they've worked for somebody before or they've been in bedside, you know, they're not necessarily used to managing a team of people and saying, this is how we're going to do it. And then following up and making sure that those processes are happening, because ideally, I do want you in the treatment room treating patients all the time. So you shouldn't have to be over the shoulder of your support staff, making sure that they're doing the things that are on those lists. But the best way to do that then is onboarding and training and making sure that the absolute set standard is, this isn't a bare minimum. This is a requirement of the job. We are doing this checklist every day. We are doing these things this way every day. That's often where I find really early on where that gap is just that we've taken all the time to come up with these policies, procedures, handbooks, SOPs, protocols, and then nobody's ever reviewing them or utilizing them. So I think if you're going to take the time to do that, then you need to use it. And then the next step really just is, again, I think sometimes we bring a lot of people on and we're really hoping that the staff member that we have is a unicorn, and they can answer the phone and they can room the patient and they can perform the consultation. They can make retail recommendations. Then we're passing them to the provider. The provider's doing the treatment. We've got them rebooking. And unfortunately, the phrase is a jack of all trades, a master of none. We really need to have people that work for us that are experts at what they're doing. So we have a front desk person who's really excellent on the phone, who is a bright face when a client walks in the door, that's greeting the client or the patient, that is able to be the face of your business, and who may be in charge of, maybe is the person calling and following up. How was your experience? Could you leave us a 5-star review? Or, oh, I see you're coming in for your Botox follow-up in a week. I noticed that our esthetician has an opening at the same time. Could I offer you 20% off to add a hydrofacial treatment to your, that's what the role we want those people to have. But that's it. We need to segment that role. And then maybe we have a medical assistant or an esthetician whose job is to bring the patient back, do a quick evaluation, maybe offer some light treatment recommendations, and then the provider's coming in and doing treatment. Somebody else is the person who may be making the retail recommendations and trying to kind of close that sale. But we can't have one person doing everything, because then, again, these systems will, that client or that employee will get burned out, but then we'll start cutting corners in a lot of different places and those foundational pieces fall apart again. So if it, for me, if you're a practice starting out, I don't expect you to have 5 team members. I mean, no one can start like that. But at the very minimum, I would say doctor, provider, NP, esthetician, person who's going to be providing the treatment. That's your goal. And you just need somebody who can help assist you with some of the other things, because not everybody can be everything all at once.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in my neighborhood for sure in that world. But I got to go back to the manual. I see this all the time. We create this, as you say, create this manual, and it just becomes a good book, a shelf sitter, and
Yep.
paperweight. And I think my experience has been is that it's mostly because we didn't cast a vision for it, and we didn't set it up. And so in our conversation, we were talking about practices thrive, so patients thrive, so they sets them up for success and want to share with others. So to me, it's actually not a procedure manual. I want to cast a vision for our thriving blueprint. And so suddenly creating that ownership, it's no longer following rules and procedures. So therefore, you as the practice owner, you're not mom and dad. Now you've given them the space to be the best version of them within the guidelines that are there. And I think I see that a lot in medical practices because it's so medical, it's so structured, and nothing wrong. I understand you need protocol. Yeah, otherwise you're putting needles in people's faces, for goodness sakes. I mean, there's some real stuff going on here. So I understand that, but I think it's finding. My background is heavily in hospitality industry, and so for instance, when you're talking about the personality types, we spend a lot of time understanding our people to place them in the position where they can shine and be the best version of them. So somebody who just loves spreadsheets and details and attention to detail and all that, they're awesome in certain areas, but generally not front facing with a guest.
Correct.
Unless the person across from them is the very same personality type, then they'll have a blast. But and so I think it's about we spend a lot of time introducing people, onboarding people with personality profiles, preferences, appreciation languages, compliment languages, so that we have an understanding and they have an understanding of where their strengths are and how we build them. And I think it speaks exactly to what you're talking about, Rebecca, that it's about being intentional with that. And, just because it's your cousin, that doesn't make them a great person with people.
Correct. Correct.
And it's that.
And so, I think to that point too, I mean, and that's something, again, with a lot of my providers who are coming from a managed care setting, they sometimes forget that we should be considering coming up with a mission statement, a value statement, something that's external facing to our patients about why we're doing this thing that we're doing, but something that's also internal to our fellow coworkers and our team members about why we're doing what we're doing. And I just had a conversation with a client last week. There's just been some issues with some of her support staff not always charting. And I said, well, the conversation that needs to be had with your team is, remember how our mission statement is to provide the best clinical outcome for our patients, because we want to be the best at what we do in our area. If we don't chart what we've done for the patient, if that patient comes back and we haven't seen the best clinical outcome, how can I then review what was done in the past to course correct, to make a new clinical judgment if it's not charted? So, employee, this isn't about me making you do these things that seem like busy work. It is about our value and our mission, which is to provide this excellent clinical outcomes for our patients. And so we do have to take a look at that. What do you want your brand to be out in the marketplace? But then also, what value do you want to bring to your clients as a team? And so that's one of the first things, especially if I'm lucky enough to get to somebody before they've launched their business, if I could do step one, it would be brainstorming. What is your external vision and what is your internal messaging, so that we can build all of these operating procedures, all of these checklists, all of these marketing strategies, picking the treatments that you're going to perform based on that.
Yeah,
and that's
beautiful.
And unfortunately, I think we just, again, as we talked about, those providers are putting the plane together in the air. They're like, oh, I took a Botox course and I'm going to get a salon suite and I'm going to do this. And I'm sure I could figure it out along the way. And unfortunately, it is putting the plane together in the air. And a lot of mistakes can be made if we're not kind of parsing this piece by piece and doing it step by step.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. And even in those situations where it's awesome if we get them when they're first starting, because you don't have to peel the layers of the onion off to get to what you need to.
Right.
But there's this, even in that, there's still, and it's this idea. If we think of vision as being what are you passionate about in terms of who you are and why you matter, and then what are the non-negotiable values that sit underneath that and hold that. And then further along the journey, our mission is about what we do and how we do it, and what are the executables to achieve that, and ultimately the KPIs and the wins, not just transactionally about what we do and how we do it, but also about who we are and why we matter. And we lose that, and that's the part gets lost. We're really good at the transactional stuff, but it's about the people stuff that's the challenge. And it's to exactly what you're saying. It's about being intentional again with recognizing that if you focus, as you say, a problem. Rebecca, we're talking here. I know that some of your details haven't been charted and stuff like that. I just want to share with you. Here's in our vision statement. Two of our core values are integrity and excellence. And I'm just curious, how do you see those two values lining up to this situation we're talking about? I don't try and solve it. I don't want to be their parent. I want them to find the solution. Say, well, when you put it that way, I probably am not measuring up. How can I help? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. It's that we don't have to get overwhelmed that we're going to have, as a parent, you're always with your kids, you're always trying to, okay, we've got to do this stuff. But these are employees, and we've hired them. They've got skill sets, and are we empowering that capacity in them sometimes? I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I see that. Sure. I'm a mediator in a lot of my work in the veterinary field, so I'm always dealing with people that just people really don't want to be told what to do. There are some, but generally people want to be empowered and given space to be the best version of themselves.
Well, and I think that again, kind of the foundation is also about your team. And, we've all been in a situation where an employee has left unexpectedly and we have to fill that spot, or an employee hasn't worked out and we have to let them go and we have to fill that spot. But I don't like hiring or bringing people on as a reactive measure. It would be a really good idea for everyone that's out there to consistently be reviewing resumes, to not wait for that moment where we have to fill a position, kind of have a group of candidates that we like, that we can call on if we need to, because you have to hire to that vision. If you're the kind of practice where every single employee is going to be responsible for cleaning bathrooms and doing laundry and cleaning and stocking and doing all of these things outside of just the actual, clinical providing that they're doing, then we need to make sure that people are going to do that's a part of both the interview questions and the onboarding. We need to be very clear and I think this is where the integrity piece comes in, very clear about what our expectations are of the people that we're interviewing and hiring, and then making those steps. Again, these kind of come back to these operating procedures. If it is your role to do this every single day, then from the day that training starts, we're doing this every single day. And we're keeping that policy the same. Not that one person doesn't have to do it, but that person does. We have to hire for our culture, hire for our brand, train for our culture, train for our brand, and then continue those standard, procedures day in and day out. Otherwise it starts to crumble. I've had situations where, I hear, how do I handle this employee? They've been with me a long time. I really like them, but they just keep not doing this thing that is my policy. Okay, maybe it's how their dress code, or maybe it's they're asking for time off without not within the time that they're supposed to be doing it, or maybe they're calling off more frequently than normal. If you have set the standard of what the policies and procedures are within your practice, then you have every right to sit down and have a leadership conversation that says, we've discussed that this is the policy. This is kind of falling off. here is your warning. Here's how I would like you to correct. Whatever that conversation is, it's a lot harder to have that conversation as a leader if you've let things slide. So, and that across anything, and that's, whether it's charting or it's your time off policies or whatever it might be. So again, having those things written and having those things, set there as you're onboarding your new employees or as you're retraining quarterly employees that we're following these things, it just makes every conversation after it so much easier.
Yeah, that's really well put. I would say it's principles before personalities. If you get into, if you've got a framework that you're working from and can point to, then you can keep personalities separated from being people taking things personally, and it's starting to strip away the focus of what you're trying to achieve. So,
correct.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk a bit about lasers.
Yeah.
Not the Star Wars version. I'd be up for a conversation on that. But lasers are obviously a big investment for many practices.
Yes.
So what should owners consider both clinically and financially before making a purchase?
So I think first things first, the thing that I would tell every single person who has reps banging down their door is you really have to separate yourself from what it is that they're pitching you. Because every single rep's singular role is to sell whatever that device is or whatever that company is, and they're going to try to fit a square peg into a round hole. They're going to tell you why it works in your practice, and that square peg may not fit into that round hole. So for me, I would never advise anyone to decide to purchase a laser just because a rep came in and told him it was the next big thing. An investment like an energy-based device needs to be the right fit for your practice because it's a treatment that you will feel clinically confident performing, that it's a treatment that is missing within your practice. So there's a treatment gap there. For example, I don't have any way to treat reds and browns. Well, that's a foundational type of treatment in aesthetic medicine. You need to get your hands on an IPL. Really know where your treatment gaps are and seek out the devices that are clinically proven to fix those treatment gaps, not the most popular or the most name-worthy or the most persistent rep. So I would say don't ever make a decision because a rep has come in and said, this is the brand new device. I mean, listen, I can tell you, I was trained by some of the best laser sales people in the industry, but we are all told the same thing. This is the device. You can be first to market, be the first one to do it when there isn't necessarily social proof that these things work. So, I would argue that the investment needs to be in a technology that's proven to work for a treatment gap that you have in your practice. So that would be the first thing, right? Make sure that you need this laser. Don't buy a laser you don't need. Two, make sure, and I see this happen a lot, and I think even honestly on our webinar that you and I were on before, Michael, there was a couple stories that came up of people who had purchased lasers because the rep had told them that they were going to be able to perform that treatment in their state, and the devices were delivered. We're going to do clinical training, and we find out that that person who bought that laser is not allowed to perform that treatment in their state, or an MD bought it and they were promised that their esthetician could do that treatment, and estheticians can't run that device. Now we're stuck with a device that we thought we were delegating away, that we can't delegate away because we didn't do our due diligence to make sure that what the rep is telling us is the case. So there are often a lot of claims made. Oh, anyone can do that. I've heard the phrase, a monkey can run it. If I was told by a rep that a monkey could run it while they're standing in front of a CO2 device, I would lose my wits, right? Like, no, a monkey cannot do it. These are ablative treatments. You need to be clinically proficient, but it's easy to be sold that because they can say whatever they want, right? And it's really on providers to make sure that we're vetting these erroneous claims. So no, not a monkey can do everything. No, not everything can be delegated. And no, not everything is safe for every skin type. That's the other thing that really kind of grinds my gears, if you will, is I consistently hear, well, I bought that device because the rep said I can use it on all Fitzpatrick types. And then that device is a technology that, if you really dig deep, that is a device that is not safe for certain skin types, but we've put a new name on it. So maybe it's got a name and we can say that it's safe for all skin types, but the wavelength, what the device is built on, isn't. And now you're a person who maybe half of your population are people of color and you're unable to treat them because we've been told it was safe for all skin types and it's not. So any of these claims, I would say do your due diligence and make sure that, you're really looking at FDA clearances, 510K clearances, make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do, and don't hesitate. Go online, see who has the device, and reach out to someone and ask them about their actual opinion on it. The laser reps don't want you to do that because they don't know if you're going to find an unhappy customer, but it's your due diligence to sometimes talk to an unhappy customer, not just the doctor that they give you the number to, because that doctor is being paid by that laser company to provide a great review of that device. Reach out in these forums like the Business of Aesthetics Forum, the Facebook page, that's where I see all the time, what's your opinion on this device? And providers are giving very truthful feedback about these devices because they want their peers to either be successful or warn them maybe if something isn't great. Where you can't always you're not going to get that from the rep, and you may not get that from the provider that the company is paying to promote them. So again, make sure that whatever device it is that you are looking at is really the right fit for your practice and a treatment gap, and making sure that any claims that the rep or the company is telling you about the clinical efficacy of the device, the safety of the device, the compliance and regulatory of you being able to perform it in your state, all of those things need to be vetted before you sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. You speak to a couple of things that are pretty, these days, with the complexity of not only the equipment, but the applicability, the licensable nature of it, the regulatory aspects of it. In my world, and I look at something like that, I mean, I don't know anything about that machine, but for me to do due diligence on that, I can go a certain distance on that. I can do the things others would do and ask questions. But I think this is really where, in this world, due diligence with a coach is very different than due diligence on your own.
Correct.
And so that's exactly what, Apex Aesthetic Consulting, that's what Rebecca is her company, that's what she does. That's where you need to be thinking about, what are you really great at? And if you're not great at it, then who are you going to bring alongside you to support you in that? And I think this is an area that's just really challenging. If somebody comes into me and says, I got this thing, it's going to solve all your problems, they say, okay, well, just give me a list of the gaps that you identified in my company. Well, what do you mean? Well, we're not talking about water and where you store it. What do you got? And it's calling them, call their bluff. And then, to my opinion, I think, Rebecca, when I do the best practices testing with other users, it's about being very intentional with the questions of saying, what gaps had you identified, and how are they being filled, and what things happened that you didn't expect. Mm-hmm. And people want to tell a story. People want to have if they pay a lot of money, they want to have some level of a success story. But mm-hmm. You want to get to those truths of what really, they told me it would do sliced bread, but it doesn't, Right. But it's just being, but I really think this is a due diligence conversation. You nailed it at the end there. And in my realm, it's like with marketing with a coach or with leadership with a coach. In that you take in the training and all the courses you do with trainers, you recognize, I always try and take 80% of my clients and focus it on the 20% of what they're great at and build everything around that. And I think that's exactly what I hear you doing in this industry. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts just on tips for getting best value for purchases, avoiding some of the, we've touched on some of the potential mistakes, but just from your experience, kind of like, if somebody's in that place?
Yeah, I think first things first is, in terms of how easily you're going to recoup your investment, is being very, very careful about the equipment financing. So that's just something else that, unfortunately, it's really tough in this industry right now. Interest rates are high, and there are a lot of predatory lenders out there. And again, a lot of times the laser company, the lender that they're recommending for you to, you've been pre-approved, we can get your payment down to this amount. If you were to really take the time, review these financing contracts, have a lawyer look over it, have your CPA look over it, you're going to find a lot of really predatory terms. And, I always say if it sounds too good to be true, that's because it is. We all know that. And we might fall victim to a laser rep saying, for today only, or, we'll get you 3 months deferred with this, or whatever it might be. And the financing terms in the end, when you look at it, you've spent, you might have paid 25% interest. And that by no means is a good business investment. If you looked at anything else in the world and said, you're going to pay 25% interest on it, we would say no. So don't let the excitement of a device make you or allow you to make poor decisions about the financing. So I would say shop your lender. That's the number one thing. And two, don't always, a device having a name brand or having a household name does not mean that it is the best device that's out there. We know by now, just because something's been in the marketplace a long time or it has a household name doesn't mean it's the clinically best out there. So I also would argue that, for some lasers, a wavelength is a wavelength is a wavelength. You can get a device that's less expensive that maybe doesn't have the shiny name on the box, but is going to clinically provide exactly what it is that you're looking to provide for your patients. So don't be sold on the glitz and glamour and the razzle dazzle, and be very wary of the financing terms, making sure to really shop that out.
Yeah, those a couple of thoughts I have. Well, Rebecca, just wondering on this, it would be on the maintenance of the equipment and what that looks like, and the updates, whether it's hardware or software. Would imagine that would be a factor.
And actually, thank you so much, because the overall cost of ownership is something that a lot of reps are not going to automatically tell you about, right? Your lifetime cost of ownership. What is the cost to maintain a service agreement, another year of warranty? What does a device time out or pulse out where I have to replace a handpiece yearly, but that wasn't mentioned? And that does happen sometimes. And these handpieces could be $15,000. So you're buying a $150,000 piece of equipment, and then you're buying a $15,000 warranty, and then you're buying a $15,000 handpiece, and that's in year one. Is there a consumable or disposable associated with it? So every time I turn this device on, do I need a card to plug in? Do I need a tip to put on? Those things are all important. If you hire a new team member and they are going to be clinically trained, do we have to pay to get a trainer to come back out again? Or are they going to support me through, making sure that I'm clinically proficient at this type of procedure? So, or am I going to find out after clinical training that this treatment can't be performed without a Zimmer device because it's too painful? Or now I need to invest in Pronox because it's too painful. All of those questions need to be answered, because all of those will play into that overall cost of ownership. And I would encourage everyone to make sure you're reaching out to your medical malpractice and your business insurance, because there could be increased costs in providing a new treatment with that as well. And I think people forget about that.
Yeah. I kind of figured that was, when you think about all that cost, that's also you bringing all the factors in when you do your forecasts of what the payback on this thing is. You need to know those costs as well. Otherwise, your numbers are just not fairly representing
Correct.
what the thing looks like. Let's shift. We kind of is watching our time, but I really want to jump back into client relationships a bit. I think that's where we started. I'd like to kind of end there. What are some best practices, a couple best practices you've found, Rebecca, for building long-term trust, which is such a huge factor in this industry, and obviously also enhances the overall patient experience?
I'm so glad you asked that, because this has been a little bit of the focus of what my education is going to bring to my clients coming into third quarter. I think there needs to be a shift outside of transactional aesthetics. And what I mean by transactional aesthetics is, I'm a provider, somebody books online for a lip filler, they come in, I give them their lip filler, they leave. That's the general aesthetics and transactional aesthetics, that's fine. But that patient may then, the next time lip filler's on special for somebody's done a TikTok down the street, now the next time they're going to that person. So for me, I think the way that you really set yourself apart is from the minute that a patient enters your practice the first time, the conversation is about lifetime treatment planning and a really comprehensive consultation, but doing it in a way that is really approachable and that you are showing that you're educating the client or patient. It's not always about sales. So what I mean by that is having a really great intake form that has lots of questions, not just medical, but also, do you see yourself as being a surgical candidate in 5 years? Yes or no? Do you see yourself as a surgical candidate in 10 years? Yes or no? And this isn't if you're providing surgical services. This is to know if the patient is going to have a surgery in 5 years, maybe they're planning a facelift in 5, then what am I doing between now and facelift to keep the client happy? If facelift is a no ever, then now how am I tailoring my treatment plan because this patient isn't going to ever have surgical intervention? Asking lifestyle questions. Are you going to, upkeep with regular maintenance treatments, or are you looking for a one and done? So just really, really comprehensive questions. And then addressing every one of those in the consultation, because when we ask more questions, the patients drive us down the right lane to the treatment that's the right fit for them, especially in those offices that might have every tool in the toolbox. I can offer really anything. So now how do I figure out what's the right thing for my patient? If you ask all of the right questions, how much downtime can you take? What's your, what does your budget look like? All of those things, and you're going to provide the most excellent treatment for them. But ultimately, what I would do in that very first time is I would say, Michael, I understand that maybe you came today to talk a little bit about Botox in these 3 areas, but in the future, what would you like to correct? What is it that is your ultimate aesthetic goal if budget was limitless and time was limitless? And then Michael, you might say, really, this bothers me. They're lifting their jowls. Or I would consider, I wish that there was an option for my eyelids that wasn't surgical. Or I'm wearing a lot of makeup, so you can't see it right now, but I have a bunch of brown spots. And you'd say, we're certainly not going to do everything today, Michael. We couldn't, I wish I could wave a magic wand, but I can't. But here's what I would say. Let's do the thing that's going to offer you the best and fastest result. So you see that I can provide you with a great treatment and you're going to trust me moving forward. So Michael, I think, we could do a little Botox in your forehead and around your eyes, but I'd also really love to just do the first IPL on the house so you can see how well it's going to lift your brown spots. And that I'm here to provide you with excellent treatment. And then let's talk about what the next 6, 9, 12 months, 1 year, 5 year looks at based on all of the things that I have. I'd suggest that you do a few vials of Sculptra, Michael, or some, and then at that point, we have now shown we have all of the things that we can do to provide you with your lifetime goal of what you'd like your skin and your what you'd like your aesthetic goals to be. But it's not saying, so here's your package for $15,000. Would you like to, put that on care credit? No, we're saying, I would really like to provide you with one extra value added service so you can see what I have to offer. And then I think down the line, you're going to want to do these IPLs every 3 months, whatever that might be. And I'm not saying that that's the exact way to go about it, but just knowing that you're educating the patient and showing them from the beginning, I'm here because I want to go on this journey with you all the way through. I want to treat to complete. I talk about that a lot in my verbiage to my clients. We're not just doing transactions. And I think that makes all the difference in the world from a client experience standpoint, because if they've now come to you for a bunch of different things, they're taxed, they're getting their skin treatments from your esthetician, they're buying your home care, and they know that when their budget allows, they're going to come to you for that injectable treatment or that laser treatment that costs more money. They're not going to go seek out a Groupon somewhere else because they are going to want to stay with who's done their treatment plan.
Well, I'm going to have to look in the mirror and after that, I'm thinking, you said it twice. No, you did. What you did it was you eliminated the pain point I would have. The first one would be, what's this going to cost, right? You took that out early, and you reaffirmed the things that I was thinking of, but then you introduced me. And I think you just did a beautiful job. Anyone listening to that, you want to re-listen to that and listen to it as a receiver, as well as a provider. And you'll be amazed at how you hear that differently, because that was really well done. So Rebecca, our time is kind of wrapping up, and I'm going to say, thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us today and sharing your experience on practice operations, laser investments, and client relationship strategies. Your experience and insights offered a real behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to run an efficient and successful aesthetic practice. We truly appreciate your time and your perspective, your insight, and your best practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was an honor.
And of course, a huge thank you to our amazing listeners. We're grateful for your continued support and enthusiasm for our podcast. If you found today's podcast valuable, please share it with your friends, team members, or colleagues in the industry, and let's keep the conversation going. Let's set somebody else up for success, shall we? So don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We love reviews, and so should you. Your feedback helps us and other practice owners, as well as aesthetic professionals, discover the show and learn from the voices such as Rebecca's shaping the future of our industry. And I want to make one last shout out to our sponsor, Equa Marketing. As I mentioned, they've been in the aesthetic space for over 20 years, and Equa is offering, as we were talking about, a complimentary digital marketing consultation that includes a 12-month strategy tailored to your goals. Again, this is not about trying to sell you something. I know that they take, to do the 1 hour session, they spend 5 or 6 hours looking at your digital footprint and seeing what's working, what's not, where there's opportunity, looking at your rankings, all that kind of stuff. So super valuable, highly recommend it. And you can go ahead and it's free. There's no hitch there. There's no secret cost. To book your session, you can visit businessofesthetics, all one word, .org/MSM. And you'll be able to get that booked. There should also be a hot link where you've picked up this podcast, so go ahead and grab that there as well. So until next time, stay focused on excellence, streamline your operations, and continue creating outstanding experiences for your patients. And on behalf of Rebecca and our whole team here, wishing you all an amazing week ahead. Thanks. Until next time.